Ah, stupid buttons. Anyways, far right extremists have been. This is like the past several weeks have been really strange. Extreme weather events notwithstanding, and people suffering like loss of everything they hold
It's
dear in
definitely
life.
not coming through.
No, how about now?
Oh, yeah, there we go. There
Okay,
we go.
so extreme weather events have been going on for the past few weeks, and aside from the extreme loss of property that and essentially what people have spent their whole lives working towards, there's this like really strange thing going on in the background. Like a couple of weeks ago, there was this whole thing about like climate change. A couple of months ago, climate change isn't real. But then once all this extreme weather happens in places that it's not supposed to, or immediately after, there's a gigantic hurricane that rolls through like the hanging dong of Florida and ruins the place. Um, all of a sudden, there's a weather control device. So it goes from like climate change isn't real to they are controlling the weather. But then now it's getting even weirder because there are some like anti-immigration, far right extremists who are embracing climate change and environmentalism because they're worried that the water supply will be consumed at unsustainable rates, and they want to ensure their quality of life is sustainable. It's getting really weird. I think
This is
it's like Bizarro season.
Well, and this is where I'm like, it feels like the intersection of lack of education and toxoplasmosis. Everything always comes back to toxoplasmosis to me in terms of like, if the government could control the weather like that, why wouldn't they just fucking flood Iran? If Iran's really or China or whatever country's supposed to be our mortal enemy and ideologically opposed. Like, why don't they just do that? Oh, obviously, it's not a logical conspiracy whatsoever, and it's just we're dealing with people who you don't know if they're trolling or stupid, and if you can't tell the difference, it doesn't really matter which one it is. And so, treating them as if they're good faith actors is always a mistake, and people just shouldn't even really engage them at all or engage their ideas in terms of like, it feels right now it feels like the Democrats are running the worst possible campaign in history. Like, they have the most conspiratorial right wing with the dumbest right wing that they're running against, and they're making it a close race because they refuse to like stop genocide and refuse to even just like remotely acknowledge Palestinians as human beings, which is like, I don't know what Israel must have on our government officials at this point, but if like we can't get somebody who isn't in office yet to like, when they're acting like they're not supplying the weapons that are killing the people, and then they're like, we just want the war to stop. Well, fucking stop sending weapons. It's really that fucking simple. And like, when they're trying to make it seem like it's somehow more complicated than that, they're making it seem like it's our fault that they're being fucking genocidal, like terrible campaigners. And so
I mean,
the way
obviously
that
they have to
they're
destroy the infrastructure enough so that when they go in with the repair modules and the piece or the supplies, everyone's like, "Oh, finally, we've got supplies."
But it's not even that many people. That's the problem. We're talking about populations, and it not to this is not dismissive. Any like one death is egregious, let alone the tens of thousands that they've already committed, and the probably tens of thousands more that they'll probably keep committing before we can finally get them to fucking stop. But it's like, in the process, they're making it seem like, oh,
Did I lose you there? Hello? Okay. Appears that we have lost a connection there. Okay, Zoom, way to go. Yes, I can. All right. All right. So, technical difficulties and stuff.
Hmm.
All right. Thank you, Bluetooth.
Is this
Bluetooth
call on
alarms.
now?
Huh? Oh,
Is
yeah.
this call on now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we've been experiencing internet outages the past couple days. So I'm not gonna get all conspiratorial and be like, "Oh, they knocked out the internet while I was talking." But that's some shit right wingers would do. They don't. They can target your internet if you're talking about them. Like
the
that.
idea that we would be targeted for babbling on the internet about the random crap that we read about over the course of a week is just really amusing to me.
Well, and that's not even far fetched so much as them acting on it. It's like at this point they're monitoring everything in our country like part of the issue is we know that IDF is training militarized police forces, and so it was like New York, I think, where they were using police resources to monitor like Muslims and make it seem as if they were legitimate cases, but it's like basically just using law enforcement tactics to harass people. So that's where I'm like, it don't matter if you have one audience member or if you have a million audience members. If you're like putting out content, it's gonna get monitored at some point. And that's the issue again. It's like that's not that's definitely happening. It don't like because we have put out so much content, it's almost impossible that some automated data collection hasn't trawled our shit. Again, it's like they're not going to act on it because we don't have a significant enough audience following for them to even, again, like the data, NSA has data, IDF has data, fucking New York police force has data, but have we done anything to make them look at it? No. And the issue is like,
what happens when a context-aware AI sifts through all of our fucking content?
I mean, but that's where it's getting to, and they've been able to like use AI to go through people's social media to highlight like if they've made comments about Israel on social media. And so that's the type of thing that is actually happening. And so we've seen that professors who speak out against Israel or speak pro Palestine start to get monitored by these forces, which again, it's like there's absolutely no reason police forces or any law enforcement agency should be monitoring private social media of people who are private citizens. And so that is where in this point of our citizens are being monitored, it's one thing for our own government to monitor us, but for like Israel to be monitoring us using our own government's back doors, that's where I'm like, that's a whole different level of power and influence over our population that a non-U.S. government shouldn't fucking have. That's like, that's worse than Black Mirror. That's worse than anything Black Mirror could ever fucking come up with. And it's like, when we're talking about it, again, the idea of them acting on it is conspiratorial, but we know that they're collecting data on fucking everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. And the issue is because they can do large language model searches to find any mention of anything remotely associated with Israel or Palestine or fucking Gaza or anything like that. It's like, yeah, it doesn't take a lot, especially when they can do sound wave analysis and have it so that it's crawling through thousands of hours of audio and just doing sound wave analysis on it instead of trying to find instead of someone actually having to listen to it.
Man, it doesn't take a lot of processing power to go through
No.
a 2-hour dialogue. When I ran my Python script to see if I could chop up our dialogues, and it's mostly useless. I mean, it did a good job. I wasn't able to really dial in the threshold for when a thought ended, and so things got kind of broken up in weird ways. But it would analyze, 2 hours, lickety split. And that's just one computer doing it, one workstation.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a lot of processing power to apply to 2 hours. It was pretty much just like boom, spat out the files, and I tried to dial it in. But anyways, so as a non-state entity, being able to do that in just a matter of seconds, I can only imagine that a state-funded agency with actual resources would be able to.
It's just trawling YouTube. It's just trawling fucking SoundCloud. It's trawling everything. So that's where I'm like, it's not us. It's the fact that they're trawling everything. But there's going to be much more relevant people for them to actually act on, which is why I'm like, I'm not under the assumption that it's going to be us that they're fucking actively monitoring.
No, that's why it's amusing to me. It's like, I don't even think that we really would ever even come close to the threshold of like, hey, let's listen to see what these guys are saying.
No, not at all. But it's because we don't really we only really talk about them in the capacity of like how our government is interacting with them. It's not like,
I mean, I only have access to like the news that's available on the internet, which I'm convinced is largely filtered by something.
I mean, but even then, it's like it's as American citizens considering how our country is interacting with Israel in terms of like supplying them with weapons and funding genocide and things like that. It's not just talking about Israel as if there's no connection, or as if like we could talk about things in Israel without them having anything to do with America on their, but we don't really talk about those things, which is where like a lot of pundits do, even the non-popular pundits. So that's where I'm like, there's so many other people who actively talk about Israel on its own before us, which again, it's like there's only so many resources.
See, can I even find a Western Wall Plaza? Let's see if I can get a live feed of. Okay, there's some people.
Well, I guess my thing is like, I see the thing about the way the media has been reporting and the way that Kamala Harris has been like talking out both sides of her mouth. It's like if somebody asks her about the genocide in Gaza, she'll start talking about October 7th. And it's like, we can't have a serious conversation if that is the question and response every fucking time, as if she's incapable of thinking about Palestinians. Like, if somebody asks you a question about Palestinians, you can't be incapable of answering that question without talking about Israelis. Like, that every fucking time, it's always going back to Israelis, which again, it's like, if somebody asks about Palestinians and Israelis, that's one thing. But every time that someone asks about Palestinians explicitly, she goes back to October 7th. And that's where I'm like, this is quite possibly the worst campaign in the history of campaigns, because so much of it is hinging on a non-American issue. The only reason it's an American issue is because we're giving them weapons. And it's like, if we stop giving them weapons and there'd be no genocide, they wouldn't be able to do it. And so when people push that question and she refuses to like acknowledge that simple truth, it basically makes it mean there's no point in trying to choose between the left, like, or the Democrats and Republicans at this point. One is just gonna lie about genocide and use like it's frustrating to watch. I mean, I don't know when it started. It definitely started decades ago, but it's become concert tours and basically like Democrats just trying to get better artists on the concert tour to make it seem like they're more popular. Because if you can get Beyonce and you can get Taylor Swift and you can get Usher, then surely you must have better policies than the people who can only get Kid Rock and Jelly Roll or whatever. And it's like, it sounds,
fucking Little John.
Right. This is where I'm like, this feels like the toxoplasmosis talking in terms of when I'm having this discussion about American politics. It's so surreal to be saying these things where I'm like, this feels like a Black Mirror episode, but it's worse than that because it's real. And knowing that there's like 3 weeks left that we basically have to, almost 3 weeks that we have to keep dealing with this shit. And we've dealt with it so long. Kamala Harris has been to Michigan like 4 times. And I don't know what she said the 4th time, bringing Lizzo out, that she didn't say the first time that is any better, because her shit has only gotten worse as they've not stopped supplying weapons to Israel and refused to acknowledge the Muslim population in Michigan. It's wild how much they fumbled the excitement and the lead in the name of Israel. That's like, if it weren't, there's been no other issues. Like the economy has taken a backseat to Israel to the point where I'm like, the economy is not doing great, but it's basically bottomed out where it doesn't feel like it's getting worse. And that I don't know if the economy can get any worse when they're trying to replace everybody with AI and it's starting to fail. It feels like the economy is about to start swinging back in the other direction. But like, it's almost like the election is stopping the economy until the election is over, and then we won't get any sort of movement in the economy until we can vote and see like, oh, who wins? Is the economy going to get better or worse? It depends on who wins. And that's where I'm like, again, that feels like the conspiratorial toxoplasmosis shit, but the way the news has just, it's almost like it's stalled out and only talks about Israel.
Cyberplasmosis. it's being infected with the inundation of some kind of, I don't know, too much information, and not even good information. It's like old curated information, and it smells like books held in a cellar. Every so often, I search for this. It's called Mind Your Decisions. It's this YouTube channel. This dude just solves math problems, and they're everything from the stuff that elementary students bring home and their parents are like, I don't even know how to look at this, to the kind of questions that Amazon asks employees on their second interview question. We're a wide range of math questions. Some of them are actually really complicated. Like some of them I look at, how do I even start this? And it just reminds me that there's always more to learn, that like math itself is still this continually evolving thing.
Right.
But it seems like politics, I think you're onto something. I don't remember when political conventions started to rely on the musical performers as nearly as much. Maybe it's always been like that, and I'm just not paying attention. Because that could also be it. I might not be paying attention at all.
I mean, here's the thing. You probably weren't paying attention when you were young, and maybe you started paying attention when you got older. But it's been there long enough that I can point at David Hasselhoff being present when the Berlin Wall came down as a singer, not as Michael Knight, not as whatever his name was on Baywatch, as a singer. So it's like I can point at Bob Marley helping stop violence and helping people get more politically active in Jamaica. So it's not like new. The issue is how much it's become the politicians leaning on the musicians, and the musicians not actually having any actual ethical or moral inclinations. Because shit, think about this. You remember who did Vote or Die?
Vote or Die?
You don't remember that?
That's Puff hilarious. Daddy?
Yes. So when we have that person telling us to vote or die, how much integrity could there be in the political messaging?
And going from vote or die to ordering like 55-gallon drums of GHB, multiple drums.
Yeah, which again, it's like when that person is who the politicians are asking to ask us to vote. What the fuck is even happening? There's no moral integrity. There's no ethical integrity. They're definitely criminals. So we're talking about war criminals asking organized criminals to ask regular people who then masquerade as musicians to ask us as regular people to participate in their new neo-Roman fucking destroying machine. Because that's where I'm like, The whole voting thing is manufactured consent. If we vote and we fucking participate in this shit, then we consented to it. And that's the thing that they're banking on in terms of like, we can't really, there's a few things we can do to stop them from arming Israel to kill people. Not really many. And pulling taxes and pulling participation are basically some of the only things we can do. And even then, those things don't really stop them. So our actual capacity as citizens to stop our government from committing war crimes it's not zero, but it's asymptotic. It's approaching zero and almost fucking hitting zero. So in that, the vote becomes this like reminder of one's inability to stop the things that are important, while then making it seem like it's our fault if we vote the wrong way or if we don't participate, when in reality they need us to participate to fucking make it seem like we're consenting with that shit. And that's why I'm like, not voting or not participating in this genocidal system does not mean that one has become apathetic or become uninvolved with affecting change in the real world. But this is where the political machine making it seem like the only way you can affect change through is by voting is simultaneously limiting one's capacity to act and affect change into voting, but then again manufacturing the consent by making that the only thing we can actually do. And it's like it's a hard place to be in the evil empire, but it feels
Which
like
of these
they're
options do
running,
you approve of?
right. But it feels like they're running out of options, they're running out of time, they're running out of capital, and they're running out of will for people to stand by. Because the issue is when you have Americans self-immolating, and then you had the most recent dude self-immolate, but he didn't like die because he just set his arm on fire. Then it's like something has changed. Something has definitely changed in America where at least with 1 out of 100 people, something has broken, and the whether it's the toxoplasmosis or the frequencies affecting people's brains, whatever it is, people are no longer going along with the manufactured consent choices, and they're stepping out of those boundaries because self-immolation is not one of the given choices or not one of the proposed choices. And so when people start self-immolating or they started self-immolating, other people had to step back and be like, okay, am I doing enough? Am I resisting enough? And a lot of people accepted that they weren't resisting enough and were like, oh no, I'm going to go to this fucking Beyonce concert. Go Kamala, go Dem Cop, go Super Cop. And then just basically like want to bury their heads in the sand. Meanwhile, the other side is just full on Nazis. So it's like, it's not like the other side is any better choice. It's more so when you have the choice between Nazis and people who are willing to commit genocide, as long as the concerts are good, obviously there's better choices. They're just not going to tell us what those choices are. And again, it's like, it's not going to come in the form of like, they're never going to give us the power to take their power away. That's just not how that shit works.
I mean, you know, RoboCop 2014 was good, but it wasn't so good that I want it to be real.
Well, and I don't know if you saw the proposals for black men that the Harris campaign just came out with, where I'm like, who's doing this? Who thought this was a good idea? And like,
Wait,
the way that
what is it? Whether this is the $1 million forgivable loans, opportunity
No.
agenda for black men.
I mean that may have been one of the yeah, they're talking about trying to do business loans because they know black men can't get business loans. So that's where I'm like, that wasn't the worst of the proposals, but in terms of like the way they're being proposed, as if
Let's see.
she came out with proposals for like first time home buyers and business owners, but then singled out black men as if she knew they weren't going to get those other benefits because they definitely aren't. So then the benefits that were proposed are like, what the fuck is wrong with this campaign? It's like, they might as well have been like, we're going to give you Newports and fucking Salems. And Cools if you really want some.
Yeah, the plan outlined Monday would provide 1 million fully forgivable loans of up to $20,000 to black entrepreneurs and others to start a business. Okay.
No, that wasn't. That's like.
Let's see what else.
Sorry, my internet went out.
Student loan forgiveness after 10 years. Supports federal level marijuana legalization, a major step beyond the Biden administration.
Black men have more access to national cannabis industry and to invest in cryptocurrency. And then making it seem like it's black men who don't want a woman as president, when we're the ones who fucking, like, I mean, not just us, but definitely we weren't the ones that didn't vote for Hillary. Like, that's not us. It's white dudes and white women that didn't vote for Hillary. And so the way that, like, yeah, Joe Biden won 87% of the black vote in 2020, and it's like Harris's numbers are 78% of black voters, which is like, maybe that has to do with fucking Palestine more than her policies, because her policies on black people, we all know they're terrible. Like, before she came out with this, like,
this is like the opposite
of her prosecutor.
This is like the opposite of her policies in California.
Exactly. So it's like people were giving her a pass on her policies in California, but then to come out and be like, we're going to study sickle cell and fucking cryptocurrency. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
Now the government's going to start buying GPUs. It's going to make it even worse. Fuck.
Because it's like,
they're
saying 1 in 5 black men support Trump. And it's like, well, what's the number for white guys? Like, why is 1 in 5 black men supporting Trump a bigger deal than what we know is definitely like a higher percentage with white men and probably white women? Like, the way that they're trying to shift their losing campaign onto black men's shoulders specifically, because like they're not throwing black women under the bus, because we know black women aren't like really voting for Trump at all. So it's like, if there's 1 in 5 black men voting for Trump, it's like 1 in 2,000 black women voting for Trump. Maybe lower than that.
I just did a Google search for percentage of white men support Trump, and the first page is all about black male voters.
Man, see, there you go. There you fucking. That's exactly the type of shit where it's like, That's the Harris campaign's fault, directly and indirectly. That you Googled that and that's what came up. That's the shit that pisses me off in terms of like they couldn't possibly be running a worse campaign.
The third top number 3 story is Obama. Black men have real reasons to doubt Harris. Scolding won't change that. Like, okay, well, why is there a picture of Obama there?
Right. What the fuck, man? The way that the media and the Harris Walz campaign are handling this shit is like they're lucky that they're running against.
I mean, there are stories that aren't about male voters among this for some reason, but the only ones that have percentages underneath the headlines are about black voters. This is weird.
Yeah. How does that even work?
Here we go. Second page. There's something about white working class voter loyalties are more complex than many realize. Okay, I'm not going to read anymore.
But they're not. No, they're not. They're just racist. Motherfuckers want to act like white loyalty isn't just pure racism because it's the same reason that when white people shoot some shit up, it suddenly becomes a fucking mental health issue. It's goddamn infuriating the way that like this double standard is like so obvious and so present, but like we can't do anything about it. But the irony to me is like them putting all their shit behind the paywall is only going to make them all go away. And so good for them for perpetuating racial separation, running these kinds of bullshit stories, putting all this blame on American problems on black men when white men explicitly are most of the fucking problem. Like, obviously men are the problem in a lot of cases, but in a lot of the shit, it's like explicitly white men. And so when it's this problem of like, who keeps voting for these fucking unqualified white men? It's fucking white men, not black men. But then they're trying to make it seem like it's black men. And so when you look it up, all you find is fucking discussion of black men. How? That's why I'm like, is that toxoplasmosis? Surely that's not a conspiracy. It feels too.
The worst part is that I was just earlier today, I was thinking to myself as I was going through YouTube how it was finally all just like guitar related content, either like examples of this is how you do something, or this is how like ways to learn a song, or information about instruments, or maintenance of instruments, or maintenance of tube amps, or how like how putting certain types of effects will affect the front end of the tube amp, and if you do certain things you can achieve other goals. How it was like, man, this is like the most perfect YouTube alignment that I think I've ever had. I'm not sure what I did to get it. It's only taken me the better part of like, I don't know, 2 decades to get YouTube to start doing exactly what I want. And then a simple search just kind of undermines the Google algorithm in that one moment. What did I tell it I didn't want so that it did that shit?
Well, and that's where, it got so bad I had to download. I know I've talked about the content blocker where like it was for tight beats, but I added shit like Joe Rogan or Andrew Tate, shit like that. And even though I have it on do not recommend subject, do not recommend the creator, have an extra layer of fucking block protection, it still tries to recommend me shit on the list of things I've like actively removed and actively brought in extensions to try to keep out of my feed, to the point where I'm like, when Americans have legitimate information put behind a paywall and then everything that's accessible is something that is pushed on them with a political or capitalist agenda, I don't think that's actually going to have the result that capitalism is expecting, in that the Gen Z and Zennials are like rebelling against this stuff and rebelling against the paradigms. And so I don't like, there's no, in, it's so much more difficult for them to do industry plants nowadays when like we grew up, even though they had talent, every person that we grew up with was damn near an industry plant, from like Britney Spears to Justin Timberlake to fucking
When I search
Jennifer
for
Lopez
why
to
is everything
Puff
behind a
Daddy.
paywall, when those sources are supported by ad revenue, I get like the first page is chock full of information.
Well, because ad revenue has gone down, and so when they can't sell the ads for various reasons, they have to try to rely on subscription models because that's their last resort. And so this to me is like, I news never should have been, if it's real news, if it's something that affects everyone and is not just gossip or rumor, then it never should have been behind a paywall, which is where daily news that runs on news networks, it basically hits that function. But even then, they sell advertisement, and so it becomes this issue of like, then they have to present things, they have to present tragic stories with a smile, or not smile, but like not actually lean into how tragic the story is, just enough so that they can go to commercial break or go to the next story that's something completely in a different emotional range. And so that emotional whiplash that comes with free news, then, because of what the newscasters have to then do to accommodate for advertisers, it's the difference between Democracy Now! And the Daily News. And so that's where I'm like, I don't know, I don't really watch Democracy Now! Um, and I'm sure anybody listening to this probably doesn't watch it either, but you know what I'm talking about in terms of how they present information, and how if something is tragic, they don't like lean out of it and just skirt the edge of the tragedy just so they can go to a commercial break. And so knowing that these, it didn't, as a kid, I don't think it ever really bothered me, but as an adult, it perpetually bothers me with the way that news is presented, in terms of like, if the people telling you these stories aren't breaking down crime, then it's okay for the people to hear these stories to just hear it and like move on. And I don't think that that behavior is conducive to empathy. It's like, it makes emotional strife into something that people are willing to just be able to consume and move on. And especially like the more uh, egregious stories where somebody is like hurt someone or done something where you're like, oh, this was like not something I wanted to think about, or like my mind. There are things when you hear them, you're like, oh, I know these things happen, but I'd be better off if I hadn't known that this specific thing actually happened. And like the way news delivers those stories so frequently peppered in with like feel good stories and things that are like relevant information, like what's the best deli in town. It's like, I shouldn't have to hear about like some egregious heinous crime to find out where the best deli is. Like, and those two things shouldn't be mixed in the same programming. Like the idea that the news goes through such a wide range of subjects and such a wide range of emotional story types, and we're all just used to it. It's like the desensitization is so dangerous in how much we've all become desensitized to like not think about these things in the process. Then our media will like not show us coffins of soldiers killed in war because then that's too sensitive of a subject. But then we'll be inundated with videos of people who've been affected by our military and also the families of the people who've like suffered, but then not showed full on carnage. It's like this weird uncanny valley of like bad things existing, but then people being able to mentally turn the channel and like put those bad things out of their mind and replace it with something else. And that's where I'm like, that feels like the Brave New World aspect of the evil empire that you're always referencing in terms of like, that to me is what it would look like when a person has been pacified into manufactured consent, when there's some heinous shit happening, even to the point where you see the heinous shit on the news and then you just flip the channel. And then your short-term memory is overwritten with whatever is on now that you're okay with actually like allowing into your psyche, which I'm all about people protecting their psyche. So I'm not, it's one thing for people to like keep their peace, but everybody doesn't actually deserve peace. And it's like on the one hand, like if you live in the evil empire and you don't do anything to like move against it, I don't know if that person actually deserves like to sleep at night or if they deserve to feel peace. I struggle with that. Like, does the fact that people can escape reality as much as they possibly want perpetuate the worst parts of reality? Kind of. It's not 100% their fault, but is it like 5 to 10%? Probably. And that's where it's hard for me to like figure out what, some people have never been active in trying to solve real problems that exist, but then they'll like do shit like vote and then make it seem like that's enough. And so that to me is also, it's like the falsehood of making it seem like people are doing something by voting. It comes back to that notion of the manufactured consent where it's like, if you voted, you did something.
So a week or so, maybe ago, yeah, some people went onto IU's campus and painted Herman Wells' statue and raised a stink. And of course, IUPD pulled up the network data because IU is wireless as all else, and I'm like, oh, this fool forgot to delete their network sign-on information. And so they tracked his phone and took it in as evidence and took his car and all the contents of his car, and he'd already been banned from being on campus for a year because of his participation in the protest, the Palestinian protest, and so now he's in trouble.
Was he a former student or just like a citizen?
I think he was a student up until the point that he was suspended. Then he became a suspended student that wasn't allowed on campus.
That's crazy.
And then he went back on campus to, show them. And then somebody reported that group. Like somebody who knew about it. Like,
man.
That's they did not read 1984. Apparently, very clearly did not read 1984. Probably only
Right.
watched part of A Brave New World, and then got bored with it because it wasn't really that great of an adaptation.
I mean, but at the same time, it's like they didn't figure it out. Aldous Huxley didn't figure it out.
No.
Fucking
No, it's
George Orwell didn't figure it out.
they just warned everyone.
Right. They figured out how to warn people, but they didn't figure out how to stop the shit.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, great. If you can warn me that I'm about to get turned into a fucking some glue in the factory, cool. Now I know. It would be better if you figured out a way not to get turned into fucking glue. But it's like, yeah, this is also like, I really feel compelled to start like writing short stories, and I'm trying to figure out where to start, but it's also, it feels like we're in a very McCarthyist era, so I'm like, you kind of got to go Vonnegut.
Yeah, you
during
can't
the
start at the
McCarthy era.
beginning when you don't know when the beginning began. You have to start now and try and work your way out from there.
But then you may never make it to the solution, which is a problem in terms of like, if you can try to find a solution, starting at the beginning is like, Americans never read the whole script. So it's going to be lost on this particular population. But it's also like, maybe the only thing we really can do is like wait for old people to die, as like that's our only recourse, and hope enough young people don't share the same views as those regressive old folks, which I think
Couching our future hopes and dreams on the potential that the future old white dude with money is going to be cooler than the current old white dude with money.
I don't think there's going to be any old white dudes with money. Is like, that is kind of going away. Like, there's fewer and fewer older white dudes with money because the older white dudes with money are keeping more, and it never actually trickles down. So I think that's where it's like, the previous older white dudes got it from stealing from non-white dudes and non-white people before that. Now they're stealing from white people, and they're not even getting rich stealing from white people. So that paradigm is done. That is gone. Like, which is why we have like an emerging middle class in China that also has exhausted their local investment from that same type of thing. So now they're not just allowed, they're encouraged to invest abroad, because now they're trying to do that same shit outside. But it's like, you know who Peter Thiel is, right?
I'm sorry, who? Oh, Peter Thiel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's never going to be another Peter Thiel again. Peter Thiel is the last in a long line of powerful white men who have way more power and influence than any man should ever have, let alone someone who's as evil and mediocre as they are in reality. So that's where I'm like, that he's the last one. And the main reason I say that is because he can't make them like they used to be able to like have one person then manufacture the next. He's been trying to make them for like the past 15 years, and the closest he's gotten is Vitalik Buterin, where it's like, you don't hear about Vitalik anymore. Not just Vitalik. I'm assuming Vitalik's still a billionaire, but Vitalik saw how the sausage was made and rebelled against it internally, which is why you don't really hear about him anymore. Like, you remember when he was the fucking golden boy and they thought he was gonna be the golden goose forever?
Oh yeah, the memes of Vitalik buttering his bread with money.
But where, again, it's like, I know he's probably sitting around somewhere with like $1 billion or whatever. He's not in the media anymore, and that's a big deal. I don't know if people have grasped.
Anywhere between 400 million and just over a billion.
Yeah, it's not. He's definitely not like poor or somewhere like without money. It's more so he's not working on a public AI project. He's not working on a public crypto project. He's not selling anything right now publicly with his face. I don't know if he'd be able, like, he probably could if he knew that he was involved at the highest level and felt comfortable putting his face on something. He probably could, but the fact that he's not tells me a lot about where culture driven venture capital is as a paradigm. It's almost over. Sam Altman he doesn't have a lot of goodwill. He has the faith of all of the white people who believe in that paradigm, but he doesn't have the faith of the white people who invest based on sound investment. And so that split has caused the white supremacist venture capital to double down on Altman. And the funny shit is, he's not going to be able to deliver what they're promising. And so that why is, to me, like, Sam Altman is like basically the end of a single face representing innovation that actually comes on the back of hundreds or thousands of innovators. Like, nobody knows anybody else associated with AI except for, at this point, and now it's like basically Elon, because he fucking bought his way into it. But the fact that so many computer scientists, so many machine learning and large language model, natural language processing engineers have gotten the industry to where it's at now, even though it's a mechanical Turk, and we only know fucking Sam Altman, who's basically a charlatan. That shit is it, it it's giving me life, honestly. It's like I'm enjoying every fucking second of this gigantic bubble being built and blown up on the back of this fucking fraud, on the back of this fucking charlatan who looks like a goddamn supervillain. Like, I don't know if anybody could look more like a fucking supervillain that's a real life person. Like, and the fact that his family doesn't like him should tell people a lot. Like, this, we're getting, because what was it?
So 3 days ago, Vitalik came out of his computer cave to lay out his grand vision for Ethereum Layer 2, and they're marketing it as the Surge. And it's a 3-minute read on Decrypt, but it's like, it's the same crap that they were saying 4 years ago and that they were saying 7 years ago. And they just changed a few names of things, but it's the same stuff, the same pitch. We're going to maintain security and decentralization. We're going to use data blobs. Oh my god. More
Well,
scaling. They've been scaling this whole time. Scaling should be the standard, not something that should be like patting themselves on the back about. Like if scaling isn't like built into like some kind of reflexive process that's always happening, then there's actually a problem. Let's give them a medal for doing what they're supposed to do. Oh man, I, I'm I've I there's part of me that really kind of enjoyed the early generative AI stuff because it was so weird and wonky and had all these weird errors and hallucinations and all that stuff. And I've kind of just been ignoring everything because I don't want to talk to Copilot or Rufus or Gemini or whatever the Facebook one is called, or I just don't want to interact with the computer like that. It turns out that despite having, the necessary hardware and the software installed to run like the NVIDIA Chat RTX thing that is supposed to be context aware and can read Chinese even, it's really not that useful for me. It just makes it take longer for me to find what I'm actually looking for because now I've got to talk to a fucking computer to get it to find something for me when I could just as easily search for that shit. It's like Control F in a PDF actually works. You can search for things.
Right.
Fuck.
But also, if you label your folders and you organize your shit, it's not really going to be easier for you to ask a program to find shit for you because you're going to know where it is. And so it's like, yeah, for people who are unorganized and have never had to deal with large amounts of data, I can see that being useful, but they're not suddenly going to now have to start dealing with large amounts of data, so it's not really actually useful for them. So it's like, it's a tool for this hypothetical person that doesn't really exist, which is why
I realize now that I've taken for granted my professional experience handling or juggling multiple, several gigabyte size databases on a regular basis. Seriously though, you're right. There's no reason that a file system should just fall apart. I think it's really easy to set up a file system and establish some kind of hierarchy, but I guess that's not the kind of thing that is like intuitive or is even taught. And so I can think of a few times where I've had to save someone's information and you go into their user folder and there's nothing there and it's like, wait, why is everything empty? And then you realize that everything's in their desktop folder and it's this mismatched set of various image files and different file types for music, and then text documents galore with names that are like at the character limit. And that up until the point that I stopped trying to save data, save people's stuff, it's like that's still a thing. I think last time I had to try and fix a computer or try and like recover data, it's like, man, where is everything? Holy shit. I don't think that those are, I mean, I hope that those are the kind of things that are being taught now. Like how to set up and maintain a file system. That should be like the first week of computer user education. Mandatory technology courses should include like maybe 2 weeks on how to set up and maintain a file system. And this should be like,
that's funny you think those exist, bro. That's like hilarious.
okay.
You know what happened? I can tell you exactly what happened. So our generation grew up learning computers because we had computer labs and computer courses. And so we were the first generation to have access to PCs that were like affordable. And so we got PCs in our home. Well, there was a generation that came next, and they had PCs in their home. So the computer labs started to be less important, and they started to like scale down the computer labs. Well, now computer labs exist, but because so many students are like technologically inclined, many of the school systems have like decided not to focus on computer education. So they don't have like typing courses or like PowerPoint education or learning how to like navigate an operating system the way we did in like elementary and middle school. So they don't have. The irony is this youngest generation that has the most access to computers has the least formal education about computing. Like, ironic. I don't know if it's irony or just like it's. I think it's irony that we assume that they're the most technologically inclined, but there is irony in that assumption leading to schools not funding computer education.
I thought schools
So
were
that's where I'm
providing
like
Chromebooks or something like that.
I mean, but no, like that's not in the budget. So they've scaled down the budget. So it's like, I mean, at a private school, yeah, they'll have it, but public schools, no. Like, more than likely, the public schools' budgets have been scaled down so much because it's even happened again at like private schools where they've scaled down what they've spent on what they've deemed to be extra. And so again, when all of the kids have PCs at home and smartphones access, like these things become luxury items for the school. So it's like they don't I went and spoke at the Positive Supports Academy in Indianapolis, and they had I think 2 computers for their whole school population.
Oh wow!
Not 2 computer labs, 2 computers, and they were not new. They were like,
Aging.
probably 6 or 7 years old. So again, I think there must have been maybe 200 students at the school, 2 computers, 1 computer per 100 people, basically, when you actually break it down. So yeah, those kids, like the thing, and Positive Supports Academy is like a unique example in that these are kids that society has deemed as high risk. So they're basically like, some of the kids are fucking working jobs that support their family. Like, you'll have 17-year-old kids who have potentially a disabled parent or something, or maybe they have one parent, or maybe they're adopted, or whatever it is. And that kid is actually the breadwinner of the family, but they still have to go to school because of the law. And so then this school has like 2 fucking computers in it. Like, that shit, that's the type of shit where I don't take Americans seriously about when they complain about like worrying about kids, because then you go look at the actual facilities for children and it's like, oh, you definitely don't care about the children here, because otherwise they'd have way better facilities. And so that's where I'm like, I know the private school I went to, they definitely still have a computer lab and they definitely still have the computer classes that I had when I was there. But the public schools, nah, not even remotely close to the same types of facilities, which is like, when this is supposed to be supposedly the richest country in the world per capita. I mean, I guess it's not per capita, as a GDP, then those types of disparities are inexcusable. There's absolutely no excuse for any child in this country not to have access to a computer course, which is why it's not your fault you assume that. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way it should be. Like, we should
I don't
have
have
that
kids,
shit.
so I don't know anything about
Right.
children's
Yeah,
education
of
at this
course.
point, and I'm not involved in the like elementary education industry, so my information is always like some inference of my I guess my best hopes.
Right. It should have gotten better since you were there, but it has.
Yeah.
Like, you wonder. That's what capitalism told us, is like, oh, as time goes on, things get better. Like, your iPhone 1 is not as good as your iPhone 15, supposedly. But school 15, 20 years ago was, in many cases, better than it is now in terms of access to technology, access to the educators, and by proxy, an individual student's capacity to succeed in that environment. And then, I don't know whatever gave adults the idea that they're capable of helping their kids with their homework just because they're adults. Like, especially in America where people don't refresh their brains with keeping up with algebra or geometry or whatever it is after they graduate. Everybody just stops paying attention to those things. And so, especially when something new like Common Core emerges, it's like, yeah, most parents aren't equipped to help their children pass grade 2 if they're lucky. And the idea that like a parent should just be able to help their kid with their homework, well, you're fucking stupid. That parent is fucking stupid if they aren't actively, like I said, continuing to update their understanding of the subjects in which their kids learning, especially if it's like history. Guess what? Fucking 40 years has happened since you were in school. So how the fuck are you going to know what the history lessons are when they're talking about what happened in 2008? Well, yeah, you were there, but were you fucking paying attention? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not well enough to give a kid a history lesson. So that's the type of shit where I'm like, they're not equipped on the math level. They're not equipped on the social studies. They're not equipped on the history. They're not equipped, definitely not equipped on the science, the chemistry, or the biology. So that's what we have fucking teachers for. If the parents were equipped to teach their kids these things, they'd be homeschooling. Or if it, at least if it were societally beneficial in a way that people were able to measure and understand, then the parents would be smart enough to teach their kids. But we've all grown up in a system where we understand that it's actually better for someone to focus on a specialized subject, get really good at that, and then have that person teach the subject instead of a bunch of fucking half-ass parents who have to then go to work and do other shit. Meanwhile, I don't blame them for not being capable of helping their kids with the information that they should not necessarily know. But it's delusional to think that they should be able to help their kids if they haven't been studying. Like, we don't learn through osmosis like that. And so the adults that stop actively learning and think that they can somehow turn around and fucking teach, that shit annoys the fucking shit out of me. And they have kids. They are fundamentally not in a place where they should be raising a mind, because then that mind thinks it's like that information is that easily accessible too. And then we get a bunch of people that think you can just like, you remember when speed reading was popular? I'm glad it finally went away. But there was a whole generation of motherfuckers that thought speed reading was real.
Oh.
Like,
you know who I never, ever in my life heard like pretend to speed read?
Your mom?
Yeah, English professors.
Yep.
People who
Exactly.
actually read everything.
Exactly.
Never once did the concept
The
of speed
actual
reading.
specialists. They're like, no, take your time so you understand. If you don't know words, look up.
Yeah.
And ain't no way a motherfucking speed reader knows every goddamn word that they're reading. And then you start to, like, the idea that you can infer words by context. Yeah, you can get 85, 90%, but the 10% can be a huge gap if you don't know what that word in that 10% means, and then you try to infer it, and then suddenly you're way off in your understanding, and then you're trying to portray yourself as somebody who understands some shit. And then somebody who didn't read doesn't know the difference. And so that to me is like, you have a bunch
like,
of people.
Really high level English sounds like people speaking about physics. It's
Well, and okay.
It doesn't always make sense. It doesn't always sound like English.
But here's the thing. I don't necessarily think that low frequency words being used makes someone sound smarter. What makes someone sound smart to me is if they speak in a way that's understandable to the targeted audience. Because if somebody speaks over their audience's head, to me that sounds like somebody who's trying to be pretentious. Or maybe they're pretentious and don't realize it. That doesn't necessarily sound smart, because this is where, to me, Neil deGrasse Tyson ends up sounding pretentious and like aloof instead of intelligent in a lot of cases, because he'll be speaking to an audience about something, and then he'll go off on some low frequency word laden convoluted rant that makes sense if you're a fucking astrophysicist or somebody who knows what he said, but his audience is going to get like 50% of those words. So to me, doing that rhetorical flourish as a means of trying to look smart, it doesn't make him look smart to me. And maybe it makes him look smart to other people, but that to me, I think there's like a difference between using low frequency words and speaking to your audience to sound smart. And that's like, sometimes he's speaking to astrophysicists, and sometimes he's debating astrophysicists.
Or sometimes he's talking to his comedian buddy in his living room.
Right. I mean, or I don't know if you ever listened to Star Talk when he had the co-host Chuck Nice.
Yeah, Chuck.
And it's like, their dynamic, you could tell Chuck really helped him out in that Neil would go off on these rants, and then Chuck would bring him back down to earth and ground him. And then Neil would like chuckle it up and fucking, have their little exchange, then do their little stupid fucking ad placement. And then it would be that cycle basically over again. And it's like, if Neil was less aloof, he wouldn't need to be grounded like that. And that, again, that to me is like the difference between somebody who has intellectual and emotional intelligence versus just intellectual intelligence. Because that's okay if a person just has intellectual intelligence. But then when they don't have emotional, that's perfectly fine.
Matt O'Dowd, that guy's like my favorite, space science personality. He answers questions, but he's pretty much like, this is what we've been researching and this is the stuff. And when he goes on Star Talk, like, he doesn't like get too wrapped up in anything. He just talks about what they're doing. He's really refreshing. I don't really pay attention to Neil deGrasse Tyson anymore, though.
Yeah, I haven't listened to him for a while. He's really hard to listen to. That's why I use him as an example, in that he feels like he can't stop being pretentious to me. In that there was a period where it was endearing because it wasn't like so ever present. But now that he has a podcast and he's been in a fucking Zoolander movie and it's like he's been on Joe Rogan 11,000 times, like we've all heard the spiel and heard the shtick, and so the novelty is lost, and that's why I feel like him not changing his shtick is proof that he has low emotional intelligence, which is why I don't fault him for his pretentiousness in the same way I do when I look at someone like Russell Brand, who has obviously high emotional intelligence and uses that to manipulate people in ways that are transparently manipulative, but also done in such ways that it's going to work on his audience because he's got the right social intelligence levels. And I think that's why, to me, it's like when a person has high social intelligence, emotional intelligence, and a high intelligence quotient, it's like they can look like they don't have any of them. I feel like Keanu Reeves is probably in that category. He doesn't come across as necessarily a genius in any of those categories, but that's because he's subdued how all of those things, how he talks about himself in those realms. And not to like, sometimes you have to like put yourself on a pedestal to ensure that like when Neil deGrasse was like in the beef between him and, was it like B.O.B., somebody who was like a flat earther, and it's like you shouldn't have to lean on credentials in those scenarios, but it's okay to throw out a credential in that type of scenario and not have it be pretentious. But that's like one of the limited times when it's not going to come across as pretentious. When somebody who's like clearly saying some incorrect shit is saying it confidently, then it doesn't look pretentious. So that's where I'm like, I know there's times when Neil deGrasse needs to flex his credentials, but that's not all the time. And
so according to the internet, Keanu Reeves' IQ fluctuates anywhere from 126 all the way to 1,000.
well, and it's like, I wasn't even thinking about the actual number so much as the fact that he's like designed a motorcycle before. So it's like, I know that if the man can like design a motorcycle, it's not from scratch, but it worked. So it's like there has to be some level of intelligence where I'm like, this isn't like an Elon Musk. Oh, he came in and fucking put his name on it. Like, no, the man actually helped design fucking Arch motorcycles. So like, to a degree, he's got more actual engineering experience than Elon Musk, hands on. But you'll never hear him say that shit, which is why he clearly has a higher emotional intelligence and social intelligence than Elon Musk. So this is where, again, you can point at people. There's not a lot of people who have that overlapping of the three. I mean, those aren't the only types of intelligence, but I feel like they're the most relevant in a society in terms of like what we can point at. It's like if somebody's really good at math or engineering or chess or something that takes quantifiable mental energy, that's impressive to people in general. It may not result in anything, but that capacity tends to impress people. If someone is able to like influence a large number of people, whether it's for politics or for spirituality or for mental health, that person then gets seen in a higher esteem. If someone demonstrates that they have the capacity to emotionally respond better to things than other people, that person often gets put on some type of pedestal. So this is where society rewarding people for, or romanticizing people for having higher intelligence in different areas, that's a byproduct of some lower understanding that it's better if we try to be better rather than not having some sort of standard or like no quality
Dude, so
standard.
I met this guy years ago that was called very affectionately Redneck Carl, and he seems slow. He really likes fixing his cars. He's a very nice guy. He's a very helpful dude. I found out at one point that when he was a kid, he was actually like a violin prodigy. Like was studying with professors at IU and all that kind of stuff. Played a recording. It's like, man, this little kid's really good. He's like, that was me. And you wouldn't think that this dude, this like clearly, smelled the gas can a few too many times, dude was at one point able to play the violin at all just by looking at him. But that stuff is always really impressive to me. Like when you see somebody, it's like, no way, and then they do something, and it's just, no way. That's like the coolest. That's like one of the coolest things to experience, I think. To be completely blown away by something. Like when someone does something that I expect them to be able to, like some athlete, like a baseball player that looks like they should be able to knock it out of the park, knocks it out of the park. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, clearly they work out. But
well, on that note, I saw there's a mixed martial artist who's 6'8", 262 pounds, I think, when he was like in competition. This motherfucker could do a backflip. Where I'm like,
hell yeah.
You
like
don't
from like standstill?
Basically.
Fuck yeah.
Which again, you don't really imagine people who are 6'8" doing backflips.
Oh, for a while there, a few months ago, there was this like video of this, kind of potato-shaped dude in a breaking circle just doing these power moves. And it kind of worked out that his center of mass was kind of barrel-shaped because his arms and legs just kind of modulated around the center of his mass. It was actually really impressive. It was one of those things like, I've always thought it was really impressive when big dudes would dance at all. Because they're big. And I'm not talking about people who have like, a spare tire. I'm just talking about large framed individuals. But, this guy was kind of round shaped. And it worked really well. It was actually very impressive. Because like, man, how do you manage that much mass?
Have you seen the Fat Free Runner?
No.
That's his name. I'm not being rude. That's literally his name.
That Fat Free Runner. No.
Dude's he's amazing. It's like, there's a reason he calls himself the Fat Free Runner, but it's like, this is like the last person you would look at and anticipate that they can do the things that he can do.
He's like, his core is like stabilized by all the extra mass. It's like a binary star gravity effect. This guy's
Like a
amazing.
stabilizer and a recoil.
Yeah, it provides inertia and stabilizing forces, and wow.
Well, and you know, I've been watching
Here's a
martial
bunch
arts
of
long
videos of
enough.
him hurting himself too. So
Oh yeah, I mean, free runners do that shit all the time, but it's like the stuff that he completes is like non-fat people can't do half that shit, like unless they're athletes.
dude,
So
normal, not fat people on their best day would hurt themselves trying to do what he's doing.
yeah, but that's where I'm like, you know, obviously you can't judge a book by its cover, and I've been watching martial arts long enough to know that it's like fitness. You can't tell somebody's fitness by looking at them. You just literally can't. Like I don't care what kind of abs or pecs or muscles they have. You literally just can't tell somebody's fitness. And the idea that you can is like it's fat phobic, but it's also just so misinformed in terms of like the notion of what athletic is meant to look like. And I think it it doesn't help people truly understand athleticism, but also I think it like does a disservice to people because then they're going to look at real athletes and not see the athleticism because of the fat.
Well,
And that's where, to me, it's
he
like,
just has the ability to carry more potential energy. Like if you've ever watched the people who swim the English Channel, they go and they look like they're very well fed, and then when they get out there, look like they're wearing like an extra skin suit because they
I
burn
mean,
off all that fat swimming that far, and that's just like part of the deal.
right. I mean, but again, it's like,
But you can't tell if that's how somebody's built just by looking at them. You can't tell
exactly.
if somebody has like really well developed skeletal muscle and can like hold a position indefinitely without getting cramped up or without enduring some or injuring their like their nervous system. You just can't tell by looking at somebody like who has like that kind of musculature. Like somebody might not have any like short muscles, might not have any burst strength, but they might be able to hold a position for like 4 hours straight without like getting hurt. That's crazy stuff, but that's like a thing. They probably also have really severe back problems later in life.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
And it's interesting because like I remember like in high school there were a few guys that I was in gym class with who they looked like they were built, but they, once we got to the whole section of gym class where we went to the weight room, they like didn't know what to do. Oh yeah, I don't do this stuff. They just had really, they had muscly genetics.
Yeah, and it's like, after so many years of seeing juiced out, roided out people not lifting heavy weight versus like what power lifters look like, it's like, I can't in any right mind associate looks with athleticism.
Oh
That's
no.
just I've just seen too much to do that at this point, which is why to me when somebody does it, it's like, oh, you've never been an athlete before. Like you don't know what athleticism looks like in terms of like
I don't think anybody looks at Jackie Chan and thinks he's capable of doing like anything that he can do. Even the current iteration of Jackie Chan, not his prime health version of Jackie Chan, but like, been around the industry so long that he's like, a treasure to the industry kind of thing.
well, and that's conversely, some people can just look at the way like another person walks and be like, oh, you do martial arts, don't you? Or oh, you're a wrestler, or oh, you do wushu, you do something, and it's like, oh, you do ballet, like even though they're not performing that thing. And that's where, to me, there's like a huge gap in understanding of like when you see somebody in motion, that's way different than seeing somebody static. And it's like, unless we're talking about somebody holding a static pose, which then obviously that's a whole different level of athleticism.
Yeah. Isometrics is crazy. Like the people who can hold themselves like horizontal to the ground on a pole, like the people who can just climb the pegboard like it's nothing, like the really athletic pegboard people, that stuff's crazy to me.
Mhm.
It's like super Pilates or super beyond Pilates. I think it's the stuff that like all of those burst training methodologies ultimately would lead to if they would not do the bursting and like hold the positions.
Yeah, do you remember the salmon ladder?
Yeah.
I feel like the pegboard is like the proto salmon ladder. Because people were doing pegboards when I was in middle school, and then like
I think the
salmon ladder became.
I think the salmon ladder and the pegboard belong on like adjacent corners of a wall. so, so they can like climb up one and then climb down the other, or climb up one,
Yeah.
transfer to the other, climb up even higher, transfer to a climbing wall with like, you know, regularly relocated grips.
Well, I think they did on American Ninja Warrior. I think they did have both.
Yeah,
on at least a couple.
that stuff's crazy. Like you know, climbing on the bottoms underside of some rigging and then climbing up a section like a chimney and then swinging over to a weird pendulum thing to get onto some bouncy ball or some giant yoga balls on pedestals over water. Like that's some of the craziest obstacle course stuff that I never would have imagined any of that stuff whenever I think about like what kind of obstacle course would I build. Like I'm not even thinking about that stuff. I'm like my obstacle course ideas are so outdated. It's like not even. It probably wouldn't even be an obstacle course. It'd be like it'd be like all ages. like 3 to 75 or something. That brought up an all ages obstacle course. It'd be like a hiking trail.
So I'm like amused that there's basically an anime for everything. And I was like, I wonder if there's like an anime for Ninja Warrior.
Oh, of course.
And of course, there's an anime about that. Which is like, that to me feels like, obviously the culture is meta and self-referential, but that's totally like the Troy Barnes Inception meme where you're like, they created the ninja, then they created Ninja Warrior, then they created anime about Ninja Warrior, and it's like, so there's like, it's like a babushka of like cultural self-reference. It's fucking amazing. But it's called Sasuke Ninja Warrior.
God, they can't help themselves.
I know, but I love that in terms of like, if you can think of it, there's probably an anime about it.
That's like
definitely a manga, but probably an anime.
That's like a sub rule of Rule 34 of the internet.
Right.
So if like, you know, there's an idea for some kind of like internet porn, it now exists. Well, if there's an idea for anime, it now exists. And if it doesn't, somebody's going to make it. It's like Rule 34A for anime.
Oh my God. It's a comic. Okay, I thought there was like a Bake Off anime. I'm like, what are the chances they did a Great British Bake Off anime specifically? But no, they haven't done that yet. what?
Well, there's
But
not an anime cake boss, but there is a cake boss about anime, and cake is a big thing in anime. There's a
but
robot.
also they did animated spots for the actual Great British Bake Off. They weren't full episodes, but they definitely animated. So it's like, yeah, I feel like that's like an honorable mention. Well, because then I'm like, okay, one of the things that got me on that was also like noticing that the Rick and Morty anime is a thing where I'm like, I stopped watching Rick and Morty, but I'm not intrigued by it, but I'm like, I'm confused by the idea of like a Rick and Morty anime because then the animation style, I saw a frame from it and I'm like, what the fuck is this? It doesn't feel like anime.
Oh, it's really weird. I tried to watch it.
Yeah.
It wasn't Rick and Morty. It was kind of looked like Rick and Morty. And the characters kind of behaved like Rick and Morty characters. And the story was, at best a rejected Rick and Morty storyline. I'm probably being overtly critical of it, but it didn't seem like Rick and Morty. It was just an anime. Like they could have had a whole completely different world design and character design, and the story would have made probably as much or more sense. So it's weird. Just as a side note, there are at least 4 or 5 animes that are basically reality TV show inspired. Kids compete in challenges. 14 people from around the world try to survive in a camp. Enemies compete in dangerous challenges. 5 contestants compete in a culinary and lifestyle showdown in the Sims 2 universe. It's funny and cool when a group of writers get together and write a story that is entirely based around a game of Dungeons and Dragons. That's freaking awesome. But creating an anime based upon that's centers around contestants that live in Sim 2 universe. That just seems like the most. They figured out how to smell their own buttholes is what happened. And this is
God.
I'm serious. This is the most that's the dumbest idea. 5 contestants compete in a culinary and lifestyle showdown in the Sims 2 universe. So the story is about people sitting in front of their computer playing a video game contest in a.
I mean, it sounds dumb, but Sword Art Online is one of the fucking biggest animes out there in manga. So, because that's basically the same premise as Sword Art Online, right?
This is one of those times where I am completely reminded that I am out of touch.
Well, okay, and this is the thing. The only reason I even know about Sword Art Online is because they were making so many games where I'm like,
What is
I
this
like
thing?
swords. I like sword art. What the fuck is sword art about? Sword Art Online. Well, and then you realize it's like basically about a bunch of people who like this video game and then participate in this video game, but then if they die in the video game, they die in real life. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of like the one about The Sims, except there's a little higher stakes.
It's like Highlander,
but
in anime.
In a video game, but also in real life.
There can be only one sword artist.
Yeah. But again, yeah, it's like it's this is super niche, like subject. Like people who are into sword art in video games, playing a video game that then traps them. That's the premise. Like not, yeah, it's very, very convoluted.
Watching an anime about people inspired by people who played a video game I need more coffee to get
Yeah,
wrap my
'cause
brain
they're
around
saying-
that. That's like
Yeah.
this is the weirdest meta entertainment yet.
It is. That's why it's like it's not weird to be confused by Sword Art Online. It takes a minute to truly understand that level of meta.
Oh, what a weirdly
But we had Reboot. It was just from the perspective of the computer.
yeah. Reboot was really good. The first iteration of Reboot was really good. The second was really weird. Felt weird than I guess normal.
But it's like, I think Reboot's even weirder in that it puts us in the protagonist's view of the thing we've all been trying to beat for our entire lives, which is also why Reboot is cool, but it's also convoluted as fuck. Like, as the viewer, we're identifying the protagonist as the machine that's trying to beat the human player. That's super convoluted. That's more convoluted than a child is able to comprehend in terms of like reframing perspective and empathy and things like that. Which is where again it's like it's a more elevated concept because of that, but it's definitely still convoluted.
Oh, that show was so great.
Yeah.
When Megabyte stopped being like the all-encompassing evil when they introduced hexadecimal, and it's like, wow, Megabyte's not even that big of a problem anymore. Whoa. In that moment, the whole framework of the show becomes much more like multi-dimensional. When there's a virus that's like trying to undermine everything, and in addition to a game trying to run, that game was so far, or that show was so far ahead of its time in the concepts it was exploring. We had it so good. Tell you what, man. Now I'm going to try and find a source to stream that show and marathon it. Like it's been ordained by the power of the internet mind at this point. I think the important part about that show is that despite being highly episodic, there was there's a story arc. And the characters actually developed. There was a whole point in that you're not supposed to spend all your time on the computer.
Right.
Like that was the whole point of the show. I think it did a great job of that. Well, I think that's enough. Well, apparently I'm so out of touch because I thought that there would be some kind of mechanism to teach people how to utilize and maintain file systems, but I guess like we don't. There probably aren't shows like Reboot that encourage people to disconnect, because if you disconnect, how are you going to watch the next, I don't know, whatever is on YouTube?
Well, I don't know if you remember, I want to say it was around the 20 aughts when they were anticipating that because people were using computers that our wrists were going to start becoming weaker and that our hands were going to become smaller, and then they projected what humans were going to look like based on that idea, and they basically look like giant heads and tiny arm people. But it's like they're not saying that shit anymore because there's not a bunch of kids using computers. If anything, if they're using any sort of interface, it's like two thumbs on a phone, so it's not like.
The funny thing about the phone position is that it's very similar to the fetal position. I mean, remarkably similar to the fetal position. Especially if somebody's like sitting in a car. That's just an adult or large human-sized fetal position. If anything, that's good for the wrists. Although doing it all the time probably creates some weird RSI for the thumbs. it's going to take a generation of people using mobile devices before, not just one, probably like 2 or 3 generations of mobile device users before the first generation starts like exhibiting like a mobile device thumb. It'll be like tennis elbow. There'll be a special elastic strap thing that wraps around the thumb and then swings around the wrist and velcros in place, and you'll be able to tell that somebody was at one point capable of swiping at like 120 words per minute.
Oh God.
Mobile thumb. It'll become a thing. I'm serious. Like,
well, I'm just, in terms of like, yeah, I don't think you're out of line in thinking that at some point somebody's going to be able to like peck and hunt 120 words per minute with their thumbs, or hunt and peck. Like,
the telltale sign is that mobile device user is going to have this like polished, smooth spot on their thumbs where.
Oh yeah, I mean, my mom played piano for so long that she lost her fingerprint. So I'm like, that definitely can happen.
Yeah, they're gonna have weird bandages on their hands, smooth dots on their thumbs, and they won't be able to grab things anymore. This will be like the generations of people who won't be able to open jars. That's actually terrible. Exceptional Radio. Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.